Hello and welcome to The Mystic and the Dreamer with Priscilla de Macedo and Peter H. Falkdale. In this next episode, it's actually part 2 of the Sun and the Moon combinations in astrology. And since Peter is the astrologer, he'll be sharing with us some wisdom on the Sun and the Moon combinations of the rest of the signs.
Perfect, yeah.
Which are...
Yes, we are going to talk about the Sun and the Moon in Libra, in Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And I need to repeat a few things. We all know that there exist 12 sun signs. So when people start talking about astrology and start babbling about how people are when you only know their sun sign, that is usually not very useful and actually is often not accurate whatsoever. So I'm doing simple astrology here as well, but now we are actually trying to combine the sun and the moon sign. So that's 144 types because you got 12 sun signs and you got 12 moon signs. And when you have that information, you can actually say something semi-intelligent about those people. But let's start then with Libra. The sun in Libra, meaning that you were born in the sign of Libra, there's only one thing we know about those people. There's only one thing we know for sure. These are people who need to experience themselves through other people. That is why it has a reputation as being the sign of partners. But if you think that all Libras absolutely need to have a partner or a traditional relationship, that's where you go wrong. That's not what it means. But it does mean that if you meet a Libra who says, I hate everybody else on earth, then you know that they are probably a lot more miserable than if someone in Aries said that. Because Aries is the sign where you actually need to discover the world through your own actions, where you need to go out there and experience the world also, like in Leo. So these are, in a certain sense, egotistical signs. But if you're born in Libra, you need other people. You need an audience, you need a partner. Again, it doesn't have to be in marriage. It can be in any other ways. So the sign is also known for peace. It's the sign of Venus. It's the sign of meaning Venus. Venus represents beauty, represents love. So it's also a sign that has to do with peace. And again, this is interesting. Some of the most warlike people I've met in my life are born in Libra. And that is understandable in the sense that you know that those people aren't happy, but they still might need to make war on everything and everybody. Their individual horoscope based on their birth time might or absolutely will tell you why. But since we only talk about the need, what makes you happy when you are Libra, that is actually peace. Being with other people and learning about yourself through other people. The moon in Libra, and now I have to repeat some of the things I said the last time. The moon sign is very different than the sun sign. The sun sign again tells you what you need to do to be happy, what you need to do to grow into, what you need to grow into. The moon sign actually tells you where you are coming from. The moon represents the home, the parents, and most important, your comfort zone. So I always tell people that when they feel bad, when they're recuperating from a bad relationship or when they're ill, people tend to find solace in their moon sign. So this means if you have the moon in Libra, that means that in order for you to feel secure in the world, you need to be with other people. Now, if you came to me and you had a huge crisis and you had the moon in Libra and you said, I am going to go on a vacation by myself in the middle of Sahara where I won't see anyone, I would actually say that is not a good idea if you have the moon in Libra, because what you're going to find solace in is being with other people. It also means that people with the moon in Libra need peaceful homes. There are people who actually are very peaceful, but somehow thrives on homes or environments that are very, 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 very chaotic. That is not the case if you have the moon in Libra. You need peace. You need a beautiful home. You need a home that is not a mess. So that's actually another thing. If you meet someone and you see their horoscope and they have the moon in Libra and their house is a mess, it's ugly, not taken care of, you really know that these people are in trouble, that this is simply not good for them. Before I go on to Scorpio, I want to tell you a little story that illustrates what we're doing here. Someone very, very, very close to me that I care for deeply is born in the sign of Leo, meaning he has the sun in Leo. His moon is in Cancer. Now, this is a person that needs, since he is a Leo, he needs to shine. In a certain sense, he needs to be that lion on the hill. He needs to take pride in something he has created, whether it's kids, small business, piece of art, it doesn't matter. But that is important. Now, this person I'm talking about has, as I said, the moon in Cancer. That means his comfort zone is the family, not taking too many chances, hiding in his shell. This person is actually quite unhappy because he has lived in his moon for a long time. There's nothing wrong with loving your family. That's not what we're talking about. More people should. But in order to feel really happy about his life, he needs to go out there, create his own business, and be number one and be the one who makes his own decisions. So this is where you have the wisdom in very, very simple astrology. When you know someone's sun sign and someone's moon sign, you actually know quite a bit about what makes them tick. Again, it's simple astrology. So now we continue to Scorpio, which happens to be Scylla's favorite sign of all.
That's not fair. Throw me under the bus here.
I just threw her under the Scorpio bus. This is a bit of an in-joke. But if you're born in Scorpio, and I have to say one thing about Scorpio, it's definitely the most misunderstood sign of all. It's also the sign that has the worst public relation department. But there's a reason for that, though. Because if you're born in Scorpio, you have a need to do everything you do 100% with an intensity and a passionate nature to get to the depth of things. I would even argue, if you meet someone who's a grown-up, who's Scorpio and lives a very superficial life, start praying for them. Because Scorpios need the intensity and passion in everything they do. And the shadow side of Scorpio is also very obvious. There is a huge tendency to be interested in the darkness of humanity. However, this does not make Scorpios worse people. It does not make them more difficult, but the tendency is totally there. So if you read an astrology book about Scorpio and you read that they love the occult, they love everything that is hidden, it's kind of the sign of FBI, it's the sign of religious cults, you could say. This, again, you cannot, I repeat, not translate into that everybody in Scorpio is dark. It just means they need to have a relationship to their own darkness. This is so important, I'm going to repeat it. If you're born in Scorpio, you cannot pretend you don't have a dark side. There are a lot of people who do. There are a lot of people who like to project their darkness into others. Just think about all the people who rant about political parties they don't like or politicians they don't like, instead of maybe looking at their own dark sides. In Scorpio, you have to do that. So this is a very fascinating sign. It's also a very emotional sign. And the problem is, it's an emotional sign that doesn't really want to show you how emotional it is. If you got your moon in Scorpio, it means, again, do remember the moon represents your comfort zone, the place you go to feel safe when the world isn't nice to you. It also represents your home and your immediate environment where you feel comfortable. So a moon in Scorpio is someone who's deeply, deeply private, who's kind of difficult, has a difficulty with opening up. And make no mistake about it, it's also people who are incredibly emotional and incredibly sensitive, but they don't want to show it because that would be considered a weakness. So people who are born with the moon in Scorpio also often have a tendency to go dark. But this can be used very constructively. That you go dark in the sense that you are interested in your own dark side, in your own personal development. So you also find wisdom in the fact that the Scorpio represents either the snake or the eagle that has risen above the darkness of themselves and the world. This also explains why this is a difficult sign if you don't want to work with yourself. If you don't want to do your inner work, if you're not interested in personal growth, you often don't become a very easy person to be around. And that is true both for moons in Scorpio and true for the sun in Scorpio, meaning if you're born in that sign. This is the sign of transformation. This is the sign of deep, deep therapy. I don't know if you thought about this, if you're new to astrology, but the following sign is always a reaction to the sign before. So what comes after Scorpio? Sagittarius, which might be the sunniest of all signs. So you go from the darkest sign, potentially, to the sunniest sign, potentially. So Sagittarius, people who are born in the sign of Sagittarius, meaning they have the sun in Sagittarius, are people who need to aspire to something. People who need to travel, philosophize. That is not a word, Peter. I'm a fucking foreigner. But it's people who need to grow, who need to continue to grow. So here we have the people who are disasters, who are born in Sagittarius, are the ones who become bitter, who stay at home, not interested in studying, not interested in the world, because this sign is extremely interested in climbing all the mountains of the world. It's actually also physically, you would say, the sign of climbing mountains. And it's the sign of doing that on a more mental and physical level, meaning educating yourself in the world. Since it is the sign about aspiration, this is also definitely the sign of spirituality. When I've said that, then do remember that every sign has its own spirituality, the same way that every sign has its own darkness and its own strength and its own weakness. So no one is saying that people are more optimistic and more outgoing because they're born in Sagittarius, because that's not necessarily the case. You can have a lot of Sagittarius who are extremely inward and stay in their own world and are not interested in the world. But I can assure you, if you're born in Sagittarius and you don't have something to do that you've never done before, your life is going to come at a standstill. You need to grow in this sign. So I would actually say personal growth is the number one in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, if your moon is in Sagittarius, meaning your emotional life and your comfort zone is in Sagittarius, then you can almost guess that in order for you to feel comfortable in the world, especially when you don't feel good, then you need to be active. It's an active sign. Now, you know the people who feel so much better when they've been jogging? I mean, I do think that that's a generalization. I actually think that most people should be active physically, of course. But here, you absolutely have to, or you're going to get deeply depressed. If you have your moon in Sagittarius and you don't feel good, then the doctor here would order you to run, to walk, and preferably new places, not the same, not the routines. This is not the sign of routines, like, for instance, cancer. This is a sign for new things, for trying new things. So if your moon is in Sagittarius, you need a bright home, preferably in contact with nature. Now, I am aware you cannot move your home into nature, but you need that vibe of optimism. So people who have their moon in Sagittarius simply need to keep on growing. The word is growth. And their home, even their physical home, actually have to reflect that.
But so don't you, I mean, when I think of Sagittarius, or at least in that essence, it's a traveler. Like, isn't traveling important for their soul?
Yes, but it's traveling on all levels, absolutely.
Okay.
And I also did mention that, but it's traveling on all levels. It is, along with Gemini, the two signs of travel. The difference is that in Sagittarius, it's about longer travel, and it's about traveling on all levels, also philosophically and like spiritually.
Higher purpose.
Yeah, spiritual. So that's why I use the word aspiration.
Where Gemini is more about fun. Like when they travel, it's about fun. It's about
and it's about knowledge. So it's also interesting. I could mention that. I don't want to complicate things, but the signs that are across from each other, Gemini and Sagittarius, actually speak to each other in the sense that in Gemini you need the knowledge. In Sagittarius you need the experience and go out there. So the shadow side, interestingly enough, is in Sagittarius. If I were to make a parody of Sagittarius, it's a new age person who has just discovered this whole world and is basing everything on their intuition, which often is 50% projections, and have absolutely no knowledge about what they talk about. Where in Gemini, the knowledge is there, but sometimes the philosophical depth isn't.
The wisdom isn't there.
The wisdom isn't, exactly.
I understand.
You understand it totally.
Yeah.
We go on to Capricorn then. So the sun in Capricorn, and now we are talking about the people who are born in that sign, of course. The sun in Capricorn, we only know one thing about you, and that is, in order for you to feel good about your life, you have to have a position. This is the most ambitious science of all. It's the science that has to do with the structure of the world. These are people who, whether they like to admit it or not, usually get their identity from what they do, in their jobs, in their work. And may I add, there is nothing wrong about that. Of course, there's everything wrong about that if that's the only thing you do. But if you are Capricorn and you tell me you're not ambitious, I might start laughing quite a bit. You just need to find the ambition that is right. And the sun sign can't tell you where that is, except for the fact that the sign has, has a rumor, or it's known for being the bosses. Doesn't necessarily mean that you will become a boss of anything, but you kind of need to have that feeling, and that's like the only thing where it has a tiny bit in common with Leo. But that's also the only thing those two signs have in common, because Capricorn is a very earthy sign, meaning that it is something, it needs a good relationship to planet Earth. The animal that is, or the symbol of that sign, is a mountain goat. And you have to realize there's a lot of wisdom in those naive symbols. A mountain goat moves slowly. If you've ever studied a mountain goat, they move slowly, but they always get there. So this is a sign of patience. This is a sign of having a goal and getting there, but often much slower than you want.
But it's also, the way I see it, strategically.
It's a very strategic sign.
Yeah, because
You're absolutely right.
They're very strategic about how to go about their ambitions.
Yes.
And that makes sense.
And that is the strength of people who are born in that sign. However, if we had the individual horoscope and we found that the rest of the horoscope was in water, and then it would be much less true. That's also why you can't say that all Capricorns are strategic. That is wrong. But you can say there's a tendency to be strategic because of the urge to get a position and be something in this world and achieve something tangible.
Yeah.
Leave something behind that is tangible, because this is a sign of the earth. So when you have the moon in Capricorn, this is a position for people when they don't feel good. Again, remember, the moon sign talks about and tells a story about what you need to do when you don't feel good, and what you actually need to get away from when you feel good, because then you need to move in to your sun sign. So the sun sign, again, is where you need to go to have a happy life. That's actually what makes you happy. That's your sun sign. The moon sign is something that automatically you find natural, something that's good for you, especially when things aren't moving along. So people with the moon in Capricorn are often people who need to be very practical, and they often are very practical, both in their homes. They need a sense of order. They need a sense of structure. These are people who actually should make plans. It's good for them to make plans. Contrary to someone, say, with the moon in Pisces, where plans is like science fiction. It doesn't exist in their world, But here there is a tendency to be practical. When people don't feel good and they have the moon in Capricorn, it's actually extremely good for them to find order in their home, to arrange things. And maybe you could actually add a little, because Scylla here has the moon in Capricorn. How do you experience that?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious for me is that to me, having a moon in Capricorn really means I want control of my emotions.
Yes.
And I find that very hysterical, because, most people, the people that really know me have seen my emotional side,
Yes.
But it's but I also am very strategic about not wanting to show certain emotions or certain things. I want control of that. So
Sure.
I rather deal it with myself than having to have all these people help me out with my own emotions.
Yeah.
And that has been a difficult thing for me, because as an empath, I tend to be always looking at people's emotions, including my own,
Sure.
all the time. So that's where the strategic planning comes out.
Yeah.
Is this mine? Is this other people's? Is this, So I had to learn. Funny enough, that's actually, I think, looking back at this actually will help me know what's mine and what's not mine.
Right.
in this position.
Yeah, in a certain
But
sense.
I'm very, like, as you can tell, I'm very strategic about my emotions.
Yeah, and also obviously, I can tell you in terms of
I look
astrology.
like cool. I look like I'm cool, calm, and collected, but that's not necessarily mean that that's true.
Right, and I also had one of my best friends at one point had the moon in Capricorn, and these are people who don't show their emotions usually, and they also have a hard time doing it, and they always, I mean, pretty much everybody who have their moons in Scorpio and Capricorn, and funnily enough, I have my moon in Scorpio, and you have your moon in Capricorn. Those are also often people with difficult childhoods, because they are known as the most difficult places the moon is in astrology. So
For the moon sign.
Yeah. So say I have the moon in Scorpio, and that is a deeply, deeply emotional person who often has a hard time getting the emotions out in the right way. Either you close totally down, or you get overly emotional and overly angry, and that was totally the way I was the first 30 years of my life, much less today, because I worked on it. So these are just two difficult positions for the moon, but you wouldn't say they are bad positions. That's ridiculous. They just give something, they give another...
But I do agree with you with having, I do feel better having order in my environment.
Obviously.
That just helps me. I don't like a lot of clutter, and I don't like a lot of, I can't live with a lot of clutter or like hoarding tendencies, because it actually makes me, my emotions, I don't feel good. It absolutely makes me not feel good at all.
But I would argue anyone in the world who has the moon in Capricorn, if they know themselves, would agree with you, because that's kind of like the only thing we can say with certainty about those people.
I mean, I'm not like, it's not like, oh, I can't have dirty dishes in the sink. Or no, it's not like that. But I need to have my stuff in places where
it's control.
It's control.
It's control.
Exactly. It's like this control.
It's
and
a
I know
sign
where
of
things
control.
are at.
So yeah,
I'm not walking into like this huge mess and not feeling good and sapping my energy.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways.
Excellent. So we'll move on to Aquarius, which is also a sign I find is somewhat misunderstood. Maybe not as much as Scorpio, but it is quite misunderstood, because the sign itself is a hilarious combination of people who are on the beat, who knows everything about the trends in the world, who are innovative and ahead of the times, and at the same time is an incredibly conservative sign. So it's kind of like the sign where you have made up your mind about something, and you may be the first one who has discovered this. Then you continue to think like that for the rest of your life. I always find that, the 68 generation is typical Aquarius, in the sense that they were on the forefront of rebelling, the hippies, and then you see them today, and they have totally the same mindset today. They even have the same hair. It's just gray now. So this is typical Aquarius. But what can we say about people who are born in the sign? And again, I want to repeat that there's only one thing we can know for 100% sure when we know someone's sun sign. And that is, if you're born in Aquarius, you need to feel good, to feel as a part of something that's bigger than yourself. Aquarius is about the world. It's a sign about friendship. It's a sign about community. So what's interesting about this sign is, if you're born in Aquarius and you want to go it alone, no matter what you do, whether you have a one-man, one-woman business, whether you're an artist or not, we actually know about you. You're not going to find satisfaction in doing it by yourself. Now, this is a generalization that is really quite true. It might take some people 80 years to discover that. But the reason why you're born in Aquarius is you have to do things for the common good. You have to have a relationship to friends. I've met a lot of Aquarius, by the way, who don't want to marry, who don't want relationships. And in a certain sense, that makes sense, because the relationships they need more than a partner is a group with a common cause. I mean, Silla and I live in Portland. Portland is a very, very Aquarian city where communities are important, where political causes are important, where all kinds of movements are important. That's all very Aquarius. Now, if you're born with your moon in Aquarius, that means something a little different, even though it's fairly easy to realize what that means. Again, if you're born with the moon in Aquarius, to feel good about yourself, your house actually needs to be a bit like a railway station. It needs to be a place where you meet with friends, where people come over, where there's a lot of intellectual discussions. Aquarius may be the most intellectual signs of all. It's probably competing with Gemini about that, but I would actually say that the most intellectual sign probably is Aquarius. New ideas, knowledge. So your home needs to be a place where you can discuss things, where there are other people. It's not necessarily good for you to be alone when you have your moon in Aquarius. Sure, from time to time, but it's about that feeling of belonging to a group of some kind. Also, one of my favorite astrologers' name is Liz Green. She was an English astrologer who wrote extremely good books in the 80s and 90s about all kinds of astrology. Both very simple books about the sun signs and Saturn, the planet, and also much, much more complicated and sophisticated books. And she said something I always remember about Aquarius. She said, Aquarius is the sign which is in least touch with the emotions of any sign. Mm-hmm. Even less than Capricorn. Yeah. Most people would probably say Capricorn is the least emotional sign of all. But I actually do believe that's true, and especially if you see people with moon in Aquarius, those are people who simply don't understand emotions. Those are people who will give you a good argument for why you should feel good, and then you tell them, but what has the rational mind? What has all your arguments to do with my emotions? I mean, emotions, per definition, cannot be explained. And a lot of people with a lot of Aquarius simply cannot get that into their heads, that the emotional life is very different. No one is going to be talked into feeling good when they don't. And even if you go back in your childhood and you find that incident that may or may not be to blame for your psychic whatever. Sorry, I should be better with words since I'm talking about about Aquarius. But I hope you get the gist.
Well, when I think of Aquarius too, like I see there are visionaries. They have that visionary quality.
Totally.
But they're also very innovative with technology, right? They love technology. So it's like
the age of Aquarius.
Yeah. But to me, it's like this really interesting combination of like, I could totally see like a robot,
Yeah.
Like not that I'm not saying Aquarius are robots. I'm just saying like that quality of the intelligence, the visionary, but it's all intellect.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It has a purpose and a vision, but there's no, that emotional side of things. The robot, let's say, doesn't have that emotional component, but it serves a great purpose. Now,
yes.
I've met many Aquariuses that have obviously a very fulfilling emotional life, but as you said yourself, I see them more into the mode of serving, and it's hard to read them sometimes.
But you also, again,
do
remember that we're supposedly in the age of Aquarius now. There are actually arguments that we are not. We're probably on the cusp, and who knows what it means anyway. But I would say that a lot of the big movements of the last 100 years or 120 years are very Aquarian. Like communism is like totally. If you want to understand the darkness and the light in the sign of Aquarius, go to communism, because the ideas were brilliant. They were wonderful. Let's share everything. And then there's a total disregard of human emotions.
And passions.
And compassion. It doesn't exist. But the ideas were wonderful. Unfortunately, that ended up with millions and millions and millions and millions of people suffering. And that is, forgive me, a parody
Yeah.
Of the sign of Aquarius. Let's move on to what most people would argue, rightly so, is the most complex of all signs. The two most complex signs are probably Scorpio and Pisces, but Pisces would probably take the cake as number one. Pisces is hard to understand, and already here you will find that people who are born in Pisces often are very hard to understand because they don't understand themselves. That is also understandable because what is the only thing that all Pisces in the world have in common? Only one thing, that is the need to be part of something that is non-tangible, meaning the Pisces, the fish, belongs in the ocean. The ocean never stops. And what is the ocean? It's all those things that you can't really define. It's the arts. It's the deep spirituality where you lose yourself. It's also on the shadow side, the drugs. It's escaping into other worlds. People who are born in Pisces who cannot find their goal in life, and you would almost argue it's actually their destiny not to find their pathway early in life, because that actually will turn out to be a strength that they don't find their pathway, that they become seekers and try everything good and bad in the world to find their own pathway. So we are talking about people who have a pathway that's difficult to find because it has to do with the world of imagination, the world of parallel universes, the world of the arts, the world of deep spirituality, of belonging to something, to worlds that are hard to grasp. It's the feeling of not being of this earth, which is actually why so many artists have a lot of Pisces in their horoscope, why so many spiritual people have Pisces as being very dominant in their horoscope. So, as you can tell, this actually also is a sign that's difficult to describe. But again, there's a lot of wisdom in looking at the symbol of the sign are two fish, or fishes, whatever you want to say, bound together, and they're trying to move in two different directions at the same time. Doesn't that say all about Pisces? So when you see a lot of, people who are struggling, and you know they're born in Pisces, it's kind of understandable. And it's also something that can become the biggest gift in their life. If they're into the personal growth, if they understand that they are part of something bigger, not like in Aquarius in the sense where you can find it in society, but this you kind of need to have a spiritual point of view. I would argue this. A lot of people would get angry, but you almost need spirituality in a way no one else does if you're born in that sign, or else you might just get very frustrated. Because where is it you find that sense of belonging that's non-tangible? That is being a soul like everybody else, who also understand that all those currents in life you can't see are incredibly important. Among others, your emotions. I find, and I want to say that because I have actually met an incredible amount of Pisces that are very down to earth. They have no idea why they're born in that sign. They don't understand anything when they read about the Pisces sign, because they have their nice little 9-to-5 jobs. They are very happy working in a bank, and there's nothing wrong in working in a bank. What is incredibly interesting about those people is when you get to know them, and when you do their whole horoscope, which of course I've done hundreds and hundreds of, you actually find that what makes them live is not working in the bank from 9 to 5. Either they are in a rock band, or either they have an imagination that is just, you think they're gray and you think they have jobs that a lot of people might consider very uninteresting and very un-Pisces. But what makes them go and what makes them tick is the world of imagination.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's also watching 10 Netflix movies a day, seriously.
Yeah.
Because what does that do? It removes you from the 9 to 5 reality.
Yeah, I see them as daydreamers and the dreamer.
Often. Often.
Which is wonderful.
Again, the non-tangible world, often. So if you have your moon in Pisces, your comfort zone actually is the world of imagination. If you were my client, and by the way, this is not PR for anything. I don't have clients. I don't want clients. I don't want your money. But if you went to an astrologer and had your horoscope done and you found out your moon is in Pisces and you were in maybe a tiny bit troubled part of your life, you actually should be someone who definitely painted, wrote, recorded your dreams, do all those kind of weird things, because that's actually what's going to make you feel good. And then, believe it or not, swimming. You're Pisces, it's not a joke. There's a reason why it's called Pisces. No, you need the water.
Oh, okay.
Like in Portland, we have floating. Moon in Pisces would be the best people for that. They would get so much out of that, of being
in the water, by the water.
Yes, because it's being part of the ocean. It actually satisfied that going back to the womb.
I learn something new every day.
Which why? I guess we are. I mean, this is still a subtle way of telling me to wind this up, and I will do that. This was, of course, the second part of our astrology. We will continue next probably about 2 weeks. We are very Pisces about this. We actually we don't make any money on it. We are just doing this hoping that there will be 2 or 3 people out there who get something out of that. But we'll probably be back in 2 or 3 weeks, perhaps with divination, because we are gonna. This has been my solo show the last 2 times, so next time Scylla will be the main voice.
Or not, who knows?
Who knows?
This is just
This sounds totally Neptunian.
No, but
and totally Pisces.
But that's why I like doing this stuff.
Yeah,
this is part of my joy, is to also, as you, to talk about spirituality. That's why we did this podcast. It's not about anything else but just
and we fun. Like you, and we are so happy you're listening to us, all 8 of you, and thanks for dropping by, and take care.
Yeah, till next time. Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.